That Christmas night, I saw something glitter in my soup, so I let my daughter-in-law taste it first. She built her fences with honey-sweet smiles. I built mine with cold, hard proof. When the church bells chimed, the family froze. The truth was no longer in the soup bowl, but in the legal file sitting right on the dining table. My name is Margaret Delaney. I am 62 years old, and for the past 8 years, I have been a widow. I live in Harbour Ridge, a town tucked against the Oregon coast, where the fog has a personality and the pine trees smell like damp earth. My life runs on a quiet schedule. Coffee at dawn, watching the mist burn off the harbour. Evenings spent knitting. The click of the needles a steady rhythm against the rain. 3 days a week. I volunteer at the Willow and Heart Community Aid, sorting donations and feeling useful. The silence of the house, once a screaming void after my husband passed, had finally settled into a comfortable companion. That companion was dismissed 3 weeks ago by a single phone call. It was Evan, my son, his voice tight with a cheerfulness that never bodes well. "Mom, hi," he started. Evan is 40, old enough to own his decisions, but he still approaches me as if I might break. "Listen, Lana and I have hit a bit of a rough patch. Just some financial static. You know how it is. We were wondering, just for a few months, if we could use the spare room, just until we get back on our feet." Lana, his wife of 5 years, 33 years old and vibrating with an energy I could never quite place. Of course. I said yes. He is my son. This is his childhood home. But I am not the soft, yielding woman I was 8 years ago. Grief chisels you down to the essentials. The house is open. "Evan," I told him, my voice level. "But my rules stand. No one gets a key to my bedroom, and my finances are my own. We are independent adults under one roof." They arrived 2 days later, their car packed tighter than a college student's. The tension was immediate. Evan buried himself in his laptop, citing urgent remote work, leaving Lana to navigate the domestic space. And navigate she did. The first sign was subtle. She never called me Mom, not even Mrs. Delaney. It was just Margaret. "Margaret. Where do you keep the good towels?" "Margaret, this old house must be expensive to heat." It was always said with a smile that reached her eyes, but not in the way warmth does. It was an assessing smile. Her gaze didn't just land on things, it appraised them. The antique sideboard, the silver tea set I never use, the seascape painting my husband bought me. I watched her cataloguing my life. Evan, meanwhile, evaporated whenever difficult topics arose. Lana became the ambassador for their needs. It was Lana who suggested a shared grocery budget, which I politely declined. It was Lana who asked about the alarm system code. I started a small, leather-bound notebook, the kind you buy at a stationery store and never know what to do with. On the first page, I wrote strange things. The first entry was Lana's eyes. My neighbour, Ruthie Cole, stopped by with a casserole. Ruthie is 70 and has seen everything Harbour Ridge has to offer. She peered at their car in my driveway, taking in lodgers. "Margaret," she asked, her voice dry. "Just Evan and his wife for a short while." Ruthie handed me the dish, her knuckles papery and strong. "Well, you lock up your trust just the same as you lock your door. Family can be the quickest thieves." She meant it as a joke, but it landed like a stone. The first chill of the Oregon winter wasn't the rain that started last Tuesday. It was a phone call. I was drying a mug when the landline rang. A polite, automated-sounding man from a company I'd never heard of. Am I speaking with the holder of the Delaney account? Yes, this is Margaret Delaney. We are just calling to verify a requested change regarding your listed beneficiary. Can you confirm the new appointee? My blood went cold. I have made no such request. There must be a mistake. He apologized stiffly, a processing error, a crossed wire. He hung up. I stood there, the dishcloth still in my hand. It was probably nothing. A scam call. A simple, stupid error. I picked up my pen and opened the notebook. Underneath Lana's eyes, I wrote beneficiary phone call, and I underlined it. Twice. The house began to feel unfamiliar. It started in small, almost invisible ways. The stack of linens in the hall closet, which I always fold with the corners facing left, were facing right. The heirloom scissors on my desk were suddenly in the kitchen junk drawer. Lana called it tidying up. I called it trespassing. Then, one afternoon, while gathering wool for my knitting bag, I noticed it. I keep a small safe, no bigger than a shoebox, on the floor of my bedroom closet, hidden behind my winter boots. It holds my husband's ring, my birth certificate, and the original deed to the house. The painted metal near the combination dial, previously pristine, now bore a fresh, thin scratch, a silvery line of exposed metal, bright against the dark grey paint. Someone had been clumsy. Someone had been trying. My bedroom door remained locked, as promised. But the attempt felt like a shout in the quiet house. The financial probes became more direct. Lana cornered me while I was washing dishes, her hands drying a plate with performative helpfulness. "Margaret," she said, her voice full of sweet reason. "We were thinking, since we're all under one roof, it might be easier to manage joint expenses, groceries, utilities, you know. If you just wanted to give me your PIN for the debit card, I could handle all the shopping. It would be so much easier for you." I paused, the running water the only sound. I turned to her, my hands soapy. "That is very thoughtful, Lana. But no, thank you. I am perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. We will continue to keep our finances separate." Her smile didn't falter, but the light in her eyes cooled. The next day, I went to the bank. I reported my card lost and ordered a new one. This time, I added a voice verification feature to the account. It's a nuisance, requiring me to speak a passphrase for any significant changes, but it felt necessary. When the old, cancelled card arrived in the mail, a flimsy piece of plastic, now useless, I didn't shred it. I placed it in the ceramic bowl on my entryway table, the one where we all drop our keys. A small, harmless piece of bait. 2 nights later, Evan approached me. This was unusual. He usually let Lana do the talking. He looked tired, rubbing the back of his neck. "Mom, we need to talk. It's about the house." He sat across from me at the kitchen table, his hands clasped. Lana and I were looking at our future. It's just, with the way things are, it would make so much sense, legally, if you added me as a co-owner on the deed. You know, just to avoid probate and legal trouble later on. It's just paperwork, really. The scratch on the safe flashed in my mind. That's a very significant step. "Evan, I will need some time to think about that." His face fell, annoyance flickering before he masked it with disappointment. "Of course. Mom, just think about it." The email from the bank arrived the following morning. It was not a phone call this time. It was an official digital alert. An attempt to change the beneficiary on your primary account was blocked by our security protocols. The voice verification had worked. My hand was shaking. This was no longer suspicion. It was a coordinated effort. I found the business card I had saved from my husband's estate planning. Jonah Mercer, a lawyer in town, known for being thorough and discreet. I sat in his quiet, book-lined office an hour later. I told him everything. The phone call, the scratch, the PIN request, the house, the email. Jonah listened without interrupting. His pen still. He was a calm man, which I appreciated. "Margaret," he said finally, "you are in a vulnerable position, but you are not without power. They are in your home as guests. They have no tenancy rights yet, but they are building a case of dependency. What do I do? You do not confront them," he said firmly. "A confrontation will only make them defensive or, worse, smarter. You will continue to be the polite, accommodating mother. But from this moment on, you will document. You will keep your notebook. Save every email. Log every strange event with a date and time. Oregon is a one-party consent state for recording. But let's not go there yet. We will gather our evidence legally, within the confines of your own property. We will wait for them to make a definitive mistake. And Lana, or Evan, will make one. They are impatient." I left his office feeling colder, but clearer. I was no longer just a grieving widow. I was a homeowner protecting her foundation. The kitchen, which had always been my space, became contested ground. Lana, it turned out, had strong opinions about my cooking. It began as helpful suggestions, but within a week, it had morphed into outright criticism. "Margaret, this is far too rich," she said one night, staring down at a chicken casserole I had made the same way for 20 years. "All this cream. We really need to be thinking about cholesterol." My goodness. She pushed the plate away. "Honestly, I should just take over the cooking. It's too much for you, and I can manage a menu that's healthier for all of us." I looked at Evan. He was scraping the casserole onto his fork, his eyes fixed on the table. "Mom, she's just trying to help. It's modern nutrition. It's different now." His silence was his assent. He was not standing in the middle. He was standing directly behind her, letting her cast the shadow. I did not argue. I simply said, "Thank you for the concern, Lana, but I enjoy cooking my own meals." I held fast to my routines. They were anchors in the shifting tide of my own home. I made my dinner at 6 o'clock sharp. I listened to the classical music program on the radio while I did the dishes, the sound of violins filling the small space. I tended my herb garden in the window box, pinching the leaves of rosemary and basil, the familiar, clean scents a comfort. The tension was a low hum, always present. It vibrated in the way Lana moved around me, in the way Evan avoided my gaze. One evening, Lana was unusually cheerful. "Margaret, do you mind if I borrow your spice grinder? I'm going to make a special rub for Evan. Something new." I kept a small, electric grinder for my peppercorns and dried herbs. "It's in the pantry, on the second shelf." An hour later, she returned it, wiped clean and placed precisely back on the shelf. But when I went to use it the next day, a strange odor clung to the plastic. It was not pepper. It was not herbs. It was a sharp, chemical bitterness. It stung the back of my throat. I washed the unit 3 times with hot soap and water. but the phantom smell remained. I recorded it in my notebook. Grinder. Chemical smell. Bitter. I am a volunteer at a community aid center. I know how to find information. The next day, I drove into town and went to a culinary supply shop. I purchased a small vial of quick test strips, the kind used for high-level culinary training or safety inspections. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "This is a bit professional, ma'am. It tests for denatonium and other extreme bitterants." I gave him my most harmless, grandmotherly smile. "Oh, I know. I'm teaching a cooking class for the children at the community center. We're doing a little segment on kitchen safety and don't eat the science experiment. Just a visual aid." He sold them to me without another question. I didn't have to wait long for confirmation. 2 days later, I was taking the recycling out to the bin. Lana had consolidated the trash, but she had missed the small wastebasket from the guest bathroom, which they were now using as their own. Tucked inside a wad of tissues, I found it. A small, empty plastic vial. The label was slick, printed from an online store. Food-grade bitterant, maximum potency. The description, still legible, promised it was non-toxic and medically safe, but would render any food item completely inedible with just a few drops. It was not poison. It was humiliation. It was designed to make me look senile, crazy, or incompetent. That afternoon, Ruthie Cole, my neighbor, waved me down by the mailbox. Her face was creased with worry. "Margaret," she said, dropping her voice, "I don't mean to pry, but I was in the grocery aisle this morning, and I overheard your daughter-in-law. She was on her phone, speaking rather forcefully." Ruthie wrung her hands. She said, "The annoying old woman deserves a lesson, and she is going to get one very, very soon." The final piece clicked into place. I was no longer defending my kitchen. I was defending my sanity. Following Jonah Mercer's advice, I went to the electronics store before dinner. I bought a single, small network camera. It was not a secret. I placed it on the tall bookshelf in the hallway, aimed squarely at the kitchen entryway. It was legal. This was my property. It did not film any private rooms, not her bedroom or my own. It just watched the threshold, a silent, impartial observer, waiting for the curtain to rise. The masks began to fall, not with a dramatic flourish, but under the mundane pressure of a ringing phone. I was in the hall, sorting mail, when Evan took a call in the living room. His voice was low, but the voice on the other end was not. It was a firm, professional speakerphone voice that bled into the hallway. "Mr. Delaney, this is our third attempt to reach you regarding the past due amount. We have to discuss the repossession of the vehicle if payment is not." Evan lunged for the phone, killing the speaker. I know. I'll handle it. Just stop calling this number." Silence followed. Then, Lana's voice, sharp and low. "What was that? Who is repossessing what I didn't move?" I stood by the hall table, breathing quietly. This was not a private conversation. This was an invasion. "It's nothing. Lana. Just a mix-up." Evan tried. "Do not lie to me. Evan. Not now." "What is going on?" A long, heavy sigh. Then, the dam of his deception broke. His confession was a mumble of numbers and excuses. Credit cards maxed out just to cover payments on other cards. A car loan that was 6 months delinquent. It's a hole. "Lana, I thought I could dig out." How big a hole, she demanded. "I think over $54,000 in revolving debt, not including the car. They're threatening a civil suit." I had expected her to panic, to yell. Instead, her voice became ice. 54,000. And you brought this circus here. You brought it to the only asset we have left. Lana, please. No. You don't get to, please. You get to fix it? That request for co-ownership. You are going to stop thinking about it, and you are going to get her to sign. We need to accelerate this. Evan, we need that house equity. Understand me. It has to be done. Best if it's settled before Christmas. I heard enough. I walked silently to my bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands steady. The notebook was full. It was time for action. I opened my laptop and sent a short email to Jonah Mercer. The subject line was urgent update. The body was one sentence. We have reached the coercion stage. His reply came within an hour. He was preparing a formal notice to vacate, citing state law. No lease existed. All that was required was reasonable notice. My next stop was Jonah's office, but for a different purpose. I was updating my will. My previous will had left the house and the bulk of my assets to Evan, my only son. The new one was ironclad. Jonah watched, his face impassive as I signed the documents. The new will placed almost my entire estate, including the house, into a trust. The beneficiary of that trust was the Willow and Hart Community Aid. Evan was not left destitute. He would receive a small, conditional stipend managed by the trust, contingent on him seeking financial and personal counseling. It was the last, best thing I could do as his mother. The next day, I went to the bank. I retrieved a certified copy of the house deed from my records. I placed it, along with a copy of my new will, into a large manila envelope. I sealed it with wax, an old-fashioned, satisfying gesture. I slid the envelope into my safe deposit box at the bank. The house was secure. My legacy was secure. When I returned home, the first thing I saw was the ceramic bowl by the door. The old, cancelled debit card was still there, a useless piece of plastic, lying in wait. It was a small, simple trap for a small, simple thief. But they weren't small thieves. They were aiming for the foundation, and they were running out of time. The week before Christmas, the house was thick with the scent of pine and forced civility. The air crackled with unspoken tension. I decided to break it, but on my terms. We should have a proper Christmas dinner. I announced one evening. Here. It's been too long since this house felt festive. Evan looked relieved. Lana's eyes lit up, but not with holiday cheer. It was the look of an opportunist. Oh, Margaret. What a wonderful idea, she gushed. We must invite people. Get the community spirit back. My thoughts exactly, I said. I was thinking of asking Ruthie Cole, and perhaps Father Collins, maybe the neighbours from across the street. Perfect Lana clapped her hands. And I will cook. It's the least I can do. I'll handle the entire main course. I'll make your famous chicken and mushroom soup for the starter. My specialty. The one she had criticised just weeks before. That's very generous. Lana, I said, my voice smooth. I accept. I will handle the decorations and the dessert. The plan was clean. On Christmas Eve morning, I was in the kitchen at 5 o'clock, before the sun or anyone else was up. I made 2 identical pots of my chicken and mushroom soup. Every ingredient was measured, every step mirrored. Pot A was a standard, heavy-bottomed Dutch oven. Pot B was my canning pot, a large vessel with a heavy lid that could be latched shut. I seasoned them both perfectly. When pot B was finished, I sealed the lid. I took a small, heat-proof kitchen key, the kind used for old-fashioned meat safes, and locked the latch mechanism. I put the key in the pocket of my housecoat. Pot B was slid to the coolest part of the stove, hidden in the back. Pot A sat in the center, ready, waiting. I spent the rest of the day setting the scene. I draped the house in warm, yellow lights. Christmas carols played softly on the radio. I moved the dining table. "Evan? Dear, help me." I called. "I think it looks much better here." Angled toward the living room. "It faces the tree perfectly." He obliged, shuffling the heavy oak table. It now sat in full, perfect view of the bookshelf on the hallway wall, and the small, dark lens of the camera I had placed there. My guests, Ruthie and Father Collins included, would be visible. Everything would be transparent. As evening fell, the guests arrived, bringing gusts of cold air and the scent of snow. Lana was a whirlwind of practiced hospitality, her face flushed and smiling. Evan was assigned the simple task of pouring the non-alcoholic sparkling cider. Lana fussed over pot A, stirring and tasting, adding a pinch of this and that, just making it perfect. "Margaret," she said. "I'm sure it will be, dear," I replied. She glanced at the spice rack, her eyes scanning. "You have so many lovely herbs. What's your secret for this soup? Any special spices I missed?" "Just salt, pepper, and thyme. Lana. The classics are always best." Just before I called everyone to the table, I went to the kitchen for the spoons. In the palm of my hand, I held the small vial of bitterant test solution. I uncapped it and, with my back to the room, allowed a single, clear drop to land on the wide bowl of my own soup spoon. It was harmless, tasteless, and would dry instantly. A verification strip, right where it needed to be. I placed the settings. I arranged my own bowl, my own marked spoon, on the table, and I set my place not at the head of the table, but on the side, directly next to Lana. I placed my soup bowl inches from her right hand, a distance that was not a barrier, but an invitation. My phone was in my pocket, set to vibrate. I had sent one text an hour ago to Jonah Mercer. "The stage is set. We are seated at 7. He was not in the house. He was stationed nearby, just 2 streets over, with a community police officer. They were observing legally. They had been invited for dessert, contingent on how the main course went, either as guests or as witnesses." Lana brought the bowls from the kitchen, placing them one by one. The steam rose in fragrant columns, smelling of thyme and cream. She set my bowl down last, the one with the marked spoon resting beside it. The lights on the Christmas tree cast warm, shifting colours on the white porcelain. "Oh, wait," Lana said, her voice a little too bright, a little too loud. She snapped her fingers. I completely forgot the finishing touch. A tiny bit of fresh rosemary. It makes all the difference. "Margaret, you taught me that." She bustled back to the kitchen counter. She did not return with a sprig of rosemary. She returned with her right hand slightly cupped, her left hand held awkwardly behind her back. As she passed my chair, she made a show of leaning over my bowl, her body shielding her hand from the guests. "This one is yours." "Right," she whispered, as if sharing a secret. Before I could answer, she picked up my spoon, the one I had coated with the test solution. "Let me just give this a little stir for you. Make sure the flavour is perfect." Her back was mostly to the table, But she was not shielded from the hallway. Her cupped hand moved quickly over the bowl. Her thumb and forefinger pinched. I saw it. A clumsy, awkward shake, as if dusting powdered sugar. A tiny cascade of crystalline particles hit the soup, vanishing instantly, melting into the hot cream. She stirred the soup vigorously with my own spoon, her smile locked in place. The camera in the hall, a silent, unblinking eye, saw every clumsy, damning second. She placed the spoon back down, the metal clicking against the ceramic. There. All set. She returned to her seat, a picture of domestic grace. A profound silence settled over the table, broken only by the faint, muffled sound of a choir singing on the radio. I let the silence sit. I let it stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then, I raised my glass of sparkling cider. "I am so glad to have you all here," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "To have this house full. Merry Christmas. Everyone. Merry Christmas." They echoed, the sound thin and hesitant. Everyone picked up their spoons. I watched them. Evan, his eyes already on his food. Father Collins, bowing his head for a private moment. Ruthie, watching me with a look of sharp concern. And Lana, her eyes bright and fixed on my face, waiting for my reaction. I did not pick up my spoon. Instead, I placed my hand on my bowl. I gave it a gentle push across the lace tablecloth, sliding it the few inches until it rested directly in front of Lana. She froze. Her own spoon, halfway to her own bowl, stopped in midair. "Lana, dear," I said, my voice soft, almost a whisper. "You did all the work. You've been so helpful. Would you do me the honor? Just taste this for me. Tell me if it's seasoned enough. My palate isn't what it used to be. It was a trap. A polite, grandmotherly trap. She was cornered by social convention. She couldn't refuse without looking rude, without admitting something was wrong with my bowl. Confidence, arrogance, and the expectant eyes of our guests forced her hand. "Oh," she stammered, a small, nervous laugh. "Of course. Margaret. I'm sure it's perfect." She set her own bowl aside. She picked up the spoon. My spoon, the adulterated spoon from the bowl I had pushed toward her. She dipped it deep, gathering a full measure of the creamy soup. She brought it to her lips and took a deep, confident, victorious sip. The change was instantaneous and violent. Her eyes flew wide open. The smile didn't just vanish, it was ripped from her face, replaced by a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. Her throat convulsed. A strangled, gagging sound tore from her as she slammed the spoon back onto the table. Her whole body recoiled. Her face flushed a dark, mottled red as she fought the urge to spit the food out in front of the pastor. The bitterness, harmless but overwhelming, was scouring her senses. "Lana? My goodness, child. What is it?" Ruthie asked, alarmed. Evan stared, his mouth open. "Lana. What's wrong?" Lana couldn't speak. She was grabbing her water glass, her eyes watering, her tongue working uselessly inside her mouth. "Oh, dear," I said, my voice laced with calm concern. "It seems something is terribly wrong with that batch." I stood up. "No one eat? Please? Evan, get your wife a clean glass of water. Immediately." As the table erupted in confused motion, I walked to the stove. I picked up the contaminated bowl. I went to the kitchen sink, poured the acrid soup out, and rinsed the bowl clean. Then, I took the small key from my apron pocket. I walked back to the stove and, in full view of everyone, I unlocked the heavy latch on pot B. I lifted the lid. A cloud of perfect, untainted steam rose to the ceiling. "It's a good thing I always make a backup," I said mildly. This one was sealed. It should be just fine. I began to ladle fresh, clean soup into new bowls for my guests. While they were still staring, I returned to the table. I took one of the small, clear testing strips from the culinary shop, the one I had bought for my children's class, from my pocket. I dipped it into the residue of the spoon Lana had dropped. I brought it back to the dining room, holding it up to the light. The tip had turned a deep, unmistakable shade of indigo. Ruthie and Father Collins watched, their faces now grim. I looked at Lana, who was scrubbing her tongue with a linen napkin. I said, quietly, so only the table could hear family food. "Lana is not a stage for teaching anyone a lesson." I did not accuse. I did not yell. I just opened the door and let the truth walk in. Lana's face was a mask of crimson and white. Her eyes, still watering from the acrid taste, locked onto mine. She finally found her voice, but it was brittle, cracking with rage. "What was that?" she hissed, slamming her napkin onto the table. "The herbs. You used spoiled herbs. That soup is rotten. You're trying to poison us." Father Collins flinched. Ruthie just watched me. "No. Lana. It wasn't the herbs," I said. I set down the clean bowl I had been holding and walked to the kitchen's utility drawer. I reached into the back and pulled out a small, clear plastic bag. I placed it on the white tablecloth, directly in front of her. Inside the bag was the empty vial I had recovered from her bathroom trash. The label, though small, was identical to the test strips I had purchased. "This, I believe, is the actual seasoning you used," I said. "Food-grade bitterant. The label matches the purchase history from an online retailer, shipped to this address 1 week ago. As you just demonstrated, it is non-toxic, but it is unbearable. I've never seen that before in my life," she spat. "You planted it. You're senile. You're setting me up." "Am I?" I asked the room. I reached into my apron pocket, but this time I pulled out my cellular phone. I tapped the screen twice. The camera I installed in the hallway, the one I placed for my own security, has a very clear view of the dining table. I thought it was important for this Christmas dinner to be transparent. I turned the screen to face the table. I did not need to search for the footage. It was ready. I pressed play. We all watched in silence. The audio was muted, but the images were damning. We saw the dining room, the guests. We saw Lana, her face bright, jumping up to fetch the rosemary. We saw her hand cupped. We saw her clumsy, hurried shake as she poured the white powder from the exact same type of vial into my bowl. We saw her stir it, her back to the guests, but her hands and the bowl in sharp, clear focus. The only sound in the room was the faint echo of the video. Evan made a low, strangled noise, like he had been punched in the stomach. He stared at the screen, then at his wife, his face a grey shade of disbelief. "Oh my God." "Lana," he whispered. "Oh my God." I stopped the video. I placed the phone on the table. This, however, was just the final act. This was the lesson you were so eager to teach me. My gaze moved from Lana to the ceramic bowl by the front door. I walked over, picked up the old, cancelled debit card, and placed it on the table next to the plastic bag. "This was also on camera," I said, my voice flat. "2 weeks ago, while I was in the garden. The footage shows you, Lana, picking up this cancelled card. It shows you photographing both the front and the back with your phone. A useless piece of plastic. But the intent was crystal clear. Evan visibly shrank. And that, I continued, was only after the main attempt failed. I walked to the sideboard, where a stack of mail sat. I retrieved a single, folded sheet of paper. I unfolded it and placed it on the table. The final exhibit. This is the printed confirmation from my bank. The email alert I received after your first week here. An attempt to change the beneficiary on your primary account was blocked. Blocked. You see, by a voice verification I added in November. You didn't know about that, did you? I turned, for the first time, to my son. Lana was trying to replace me as the beneficiary. Evan. While you were asking me to sign the house over, she was trying to empty the bank. The truth, all of it, lay on the table. Lana's defense shattered. The pretense of denial evaporated, and the raw, desperate animal underneath burst out. She shoved her chair back, the legs screaming against the wooden floor. She stood, her chest heaving, tears of pure fury streaming down her face. You, she shrieked, her finger stabbing the air at me. You did this. You set me up, this whole dinner, the guests. You did this to humiliate me, to shame me in front of everyone. The kitchen court was silent. Ruthie looked down at her plate. Father Collins seemed to be praying. I remained seated, looking up at her tantrum. No. Lana, I said, and my voice cut through her yelling, silencing her. I did not want to humiliate you. I wanted everyone in this house to be safe. I wanted to be safe in my own home. The sound of Lana's shriek was still hanging in the air, a sour, vibrating note, when a sharp, clear knock sounded at the front door. No one moved. We were a frozen tableau. Ruthie, Father Collins, Evan, and Lana, all trapped in the wreckage of the Christmas dinner. The knock came again, firmer this time. I placed my napkin on the table. That will be for me. I walked to the door and opened it. Jonah Mercer stood on the porch, the cold night air behind him. He was not dressed for a party. He was wearing a dark suit. Beside him stood a man in a community police uniform, his hat in his hands. Margaret, Jonah said, his voice calm. Jonah? Officer. Please, come in. I believe you were invited for dessert. Lana's face went white. Evan looked like he was going to be sick. Jonah and the officer stepped into the entryway, their presence fundamentally shifting the air in the room. This was no longer a family argument. It was a legal proceeding. Good evening, everyone, Jonah said, his voice carrying easily into the dining room. My name is Jonah Mercer. I am Margaret Delaney's legal representative. He looked at Evan, then at Lana. I am sorry to interrupt your holiday, he continued, though it was clear he was not. But we have a matter of some urgency. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a long, white envelope. He placed it on the dining table, on top of the cancelled credit card and the bank email. This, he said, addressing Evan and Lana, is a formal, legal notice to vacate these premises. You are not tenants, you have no lease, and your stay here as guests is, as of this moment, terminated. You can't do this? Lana screamed, her voice breaking. It's Christmas. You can't throw us out. The community officer stepped forward slightly. He was calm, but his uniform did the talking. Ma'am, Mr. Mercer is correct. This is a civil matter. As long as everyone cooperates, it remains a civil matter. We are here purely to prevent a breach of the peace. No criminal charges are being filed tonight. The key phrase being, if everyone cooperates. Evan, who had been paralyzed, finally moved. He looked at the officer, at Jonah, at the evidence, and then at me. His face crumpled. "Mum," he said, his voice thick. "Mum, can I just talk to you alone? Just for 1 minute." Lana shot him a look. "Evan, don't you dare." He ignored her. He was only looking at me. I nodded. In the kitchen, we stepped the 10 feet into the kitchen, the others watching us like hawks. The smell of the good soup, pot B, still hung in the air. He didn't know where to start. He ran his hands through his hair. "Mum, I knew about the debt. I didn't know how bad. I mean, I knew it was bad. That $54,000. It's real. I didn't know about the soup. I swear. I didn't know about the bank or the card. You just what?" "Evan?" I asked, my voice not unkind. "Just tired. I just let it happen," he whispered, the admission tearing out of him. I let her talk. I let her plan. I didn't say anything. I stood in the middle, and I knew it was wrong, and I said nothing. My silence, it was the same as helping her. "I am so sorry, Mom." He was crying, but I felt nothing, just a deep, cold ache. "I know," I said. "This is what happens now," I said, my voice quiet but firm, forcing him to meet my gaze. "This is the humanitarian part. You and Lana have 48 hours. You will pack your things, and you will be out of this house by noon on December 27th. That is more than the law requires." I reached into the drawer where I kept the notepads and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "This is a list of temporary housing resources and financial counseling centers in the county. Willow and Hart compiled it. It is all I can offer you. But, Mom, I am not discussing prosecution. Evan, I am not calling the police about the fraud or the attempted theft. I am only drawing a line. This is my boundary. This is my home. You crossed a line of trust that cannot be uncrossed." We walked back into the dining room. Lana was vibrating with rage. Father Collins, who had been silent, finally spoke. He looked at everyone, his old eyes full of a deep sadness. He didn't preach. He just said, "The truth is a heavy thing, but it is, at least, a solid thing. Responsibility is the only foundation left to build on." Lana ignored him. She advanced on Jonah. "This is ridiculous. 48 hours. We need time. We have nowhere to go. You have to give us unlimited time. Weeks. We have rights." Jonah Mercer did not blink. He looked at his watch, then at Lana. "Ms. Prescott," he said, "your rights as guests ended the moment you attempted to defraud the owner of this house. This process has been documented for nearly 3 months. Every request, every attempt, every threat. 48 hours is not a negotiation. It is a gift. The officer here will document your agreement to leave peacefully." He slid the paper toward Evan. "It is, as the father said, the only reasonable end to the matter." The house was impossibly quiet. Ruthie and Father Collins had departed quickly, their faces a mixture of pity and shock, leaving me with the clean soup and the wreckage. Jonah and the officer had concluded their business, their voices low and professional. Evan and Lana were in their room. I could not hear them, but I could feel their presence, a dark, pressurized pocket of anger and shame, separate from the rest of the house. I went to the kitchen. The dining table was a battlefield of linen napkins, half-empty glasses, and the cooling, untouched bowls of soup I had served from pot B. I gathered them all. I stood at the sink and turned on the water, as hot as my hands could bear. I washed every plate, every glass, and every piece of silver. The work was a comfort, a familiar, steady rhythm. I washed the bowl Lana had tasted from, watching the last of the creamy, bitter residue circle the drain and disappear. The chemical was gone, washed away in warm water. I wished the deceit could be purged so easily. When the kitchen was pristine, the counters wiped, the floor swept. I slid open the glass door to the backyard. The cold, damp air of a harbour ridge midnight hit my face. It smelled of pine and the distant, salty edge of the ocean. The little yellow string lights I'd hung on the trellis were blurred by the mist, soft halos in the dark. I stepped onto the damp stones, pulling my cardigan tight. I stood there, listening to the silence of my own home, truly my own again. Well, Thomas, I whispered, to the memory of my husband, to the night air. I believe the foundation is secure. I felt the familiar ache of his absence, but tonight it was not loneliness. It was a report, filed and finished. A soft tap came at the glass door. Ruthie. She was holding a pie tin covered in a dish towel. I went home, she said, stepping inside. And then I came back. I figured you could use this more than I could. She uncovered it. A perfect apple pie. Still warm. Ruthie, this is too much. After all that. Nonsense, she said, placing it on the clean counter. Today's bitter is for tomorrow's sweet. Margaret. That's what my mother always said. You eat this. You've earned it. She gave my arm a firm, quick squeeze, and then she was gone. A true neighbour. My phone, sitting on the charger, vibrated against the counter. I looked down. A wall of text. It was from Evan. It was a long, tangled, pathetic message. A flood of apologies, of self-hatred, of promises to pay back the $54,000, of blaming Lana, then blaming himself, of swearing he didn't know the depths of it. It was the frantic, desperate babbling of a drowning man. At the very bottom, a single, clear plea. Mom, please. Can I just see you in the morning? Alone? Please. I read it all. I didn't reply. I sat down at the kitchen table, the silence profound. From the hook by the door, I took down 3 keys and laid them on the polished wood in a row. The heavy, iron key to the front gate, the small, silver key to my bedroom door, the one I had insisted on, the simple brass key to the kitchen pantry. I stared at them, gleaming in the low light. I wondered which one, exactly, had opened the door to such a profound and misplaced trust. I pushed them aside. I had one last piece of business. I went to my desk and retrieved the final signature pages for the Willow and Heart Community Aid Trust. I sat back at the table, read the paragraphs one last time, and signed my name. My hand was perfectly steady. I opened my calendar to the new year and wrote a note for the Community Knitting Club order merino wool for the spring blankets. There were no tears. I didn't feel sadness or even anger. I just felt empty, in the way a room feels after it has been thoroughly cleaned. I let out a long, slow breath that I felt I had been holding for 8 years. It was the feeling of my own spine, solid and straight. My self-respect had returned, not with a trumpet, but by quietly taking its seat at the table. The grandfather clock in the hall began to chime. Midnight. It was Officially, Christmas Day. I picked up my phone. I looked at Evan's desperate, sprawling text. I typed one. Short line in response. 9 a.m. on the front porch. I hit send. At exactly 9 a.m. on Christmas morning, the grey, watery light of the Oregon coast found Evan on my front porch. He was alone, as I had requested. He looked like a shipwreck. His eyes were dark, bruised-looking hollows, and his face was covered in a rough, pale stubble. He was holding a thick manila envelope, not a gift, but a confession. I knew, just by looking at it, that it contained the statements for his $54,000 of debt. I did not invite him in. I had a small table and 2 chairs waiting. On the table, I had placed 2 steaming bowls of soup from pot B, the second soup. He sat down heavily, his eyes on the wooden planks of the porch. I pushed one of the bowls toward him. He stared at it as if it were the cause of all his problems. "This soup," I said, my voice quiet in the cold morning air, "is a second chance for my son. It is not a second chance for the lies." I placed the formal agreement to vacate on the table, along with a fresh copy of the list of financial support centers. He took the pen, his hand shaking slightly, and signed the paper. He folded the support list and put it in his pocket, alongside his envelope of failure. Then, I placed one last item between us, a single, black USB flash drive. "What is that?" he whispered, his voice raw. "That is my notebook," I said. "It is the video from the hallway. It is the email from the bank, and the digital record of your phone call with the debt collector. It is the full, complete log of the last 3 months. This, Evan, is why I chose safety. This is why I chose to protect my home." He looked at the small piece of plastic, this tiny concentration of all their deceit, and he flinched. He looked up at me, and the last of his defenses broke. The tears that came were not the hot tears of rage I saw in Lana, but the quiet, broken tears of a boy who had been found out. "Mom," he choked out. Can I just have a hug?" The word hit me. Mum. He had used it, and the mother in me, the one who had changed him and fed him and loved him, wanted to stand and hold him. But the woman he had conspired against, the woman whose home he had tried to take, could not. I did not stand. But I reached across the table, past the 2 bowls of soup, and I took his hand. It was cold and damp. I held it firmly. "Trust is built, Evan," I said. "It is not requested." The sound of the front gate, loud in the morning quiet, made us both turn. Lana. She was late, and she was coming in hot, her face a mask of righteous fury, ready to start a war. "Evan, what are you doing?" "You are not signing anything until our lawyer." She stopped dead on the walkway. The community officer from last night was standing at the base of the porch steps. He was not in our way, but he was present, holding a clipboard, a calm, non-negotiable symbol of the law. Lana's rage sputtered, confused. "The keys? Ms. Prescott," the officer said, his voice polite but firm. Evan stood up. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the set of keys to my house, and walked down the steps. He placed them on the clipboard. The officer made a check mark. Lana opened her mouth, a new torrent of accusations building, her voice rising. But Evan, for the first time, cut her off. He turned to his wife, his face dead with exhaustion, and I saw, for the first time, a man making a choice. "Don't," Lana, he said, don't add anything else. We're leaving. He walked past her, toward the gate. He did not look back. Lana stared at me, her eyes pure venom. But the officer was there. The audience was gone. The game was over. She turned, her shoulders rigid, and followed her husband out of my life. The gate clicked shut. I sat on the porch, alone, the air cold and clean. I looked at the bowl of soup Evan hadn't touched. I picked up my own. I blew gently on the steam. It smelled of rosemary and home. There was no bitterness, not a trace. On the porch railings, the yellow Christmas lights were still blinking. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect. And please share your own thoughts. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear it.